Mom, starting with your next paycheck, we are going to transfer all your money to my account. Those were the words my son Michael said to me that Thursday afternoon while drinking coffee in my kitchen, as if he were proposing something completely normal, as if he were doing me a favor, as if I were incapable of handling my own money at 62 years old. I just stared at him. I said nothing for a few seconds. I just looked him in the eyes, searching for some sign that would explain why my own son, the boy I raised alone, the one I fed with the sweat of my brow, was asking me for total access to my bank account. But I found nothing. I only saw that calm smile, that assurance of someone who knows he is in control. So I took a deep breath and told him yes, that it seemed fine, that I trusted him. Michael's smile widened. He stood up and gave me a quick, mechanical kiss on the forehead. One of those kisses that mean nothing. He told me it was for the best. That I would no longer have to worry about anything. That he would take care of everything. That it was for my own good. For my own good. Those words were left floating in the air after he left my house. That same night, just like every Friday, Michael returned. But he did not come alone. He arrived with his wife as always. They came expecting to find dinner ready, expecting the table to be set, expecting hot and free food, just like they had had for the last 3 years. I heard them arrive. I heard their footsteps at the door. I heard the key that I myself had given him turning in the lock. I heard the door open, and then I heard the scream, a sharp, desperate scream. The scream of someone who has just seen something they did not expect to see. The scream of someone who has just understood that things were not going to be how they thought. I remained seated in my chair, in the empty kitchen, in the empty house, listening to that scream bounce off the walls. I did not move. I did not go to see what was happening. I already knew what was happening. Michael came running into the kitchen. His face was pale, his eyes wide open. His wife came behind him with the same expression of surprise and confusion. "Mom!" Michael shouted. "Mom, what did you do? Where is everything? Where is the furniture? Where is the TV? Where is everything that was here?" I looked at him with a calm that not even I knew I had. And I told him with the softest voice I could muster that I had sold some things, that I needed the money, that in the end, if he was going to handle my finances, I needed to make sure I had some cash first. His face changed from pale to red, from surprise to fury. He took a step toward me, and for the first time in my life, I saw my son as he really was. Not the boy I had raised, not the young man I helped build a life for, but a stranger. Someone who looked at me with rage, with something that looked dangerously like hatred. "You are crazy," he told me, "completely crazy. How could you sell everything without consulting me? Now what are we going to do when we come over? How are we going to be comfortable here?" That was the phrase that changed everything. How are we going to be comfortable here? Not how will you be comfortable, Mom. He did not care how it affected me, but how it would affect them, as if my house were an extension of them, as if my things existed for their convenience. His wife approached then. She looked at me with those eyes that had always seemed cold and calculating. And she told me something I will never forget, that I was being selfish, that I only thought of myself, that they came every week to keep me company, to make sure I was okay, and that this was how I repaid them. Selfish. Me. The woman who worked double shifts for years so Michael could study. The woman who gave up rebuilding her life when his father abandoned us because she did not want her son to grow up with a stepfather. The woman who lived in small apartments, who wore old clothes, who ate the minimum so that he would have what was necessary. Selfish. Michael just stood there looking at me as if I were a problem he needed to solve. And then he said something that split me in two. He said that maybe it had been a mistake to suggest the bank account idea, because maybe I was no longer in a condition to make good decisions. That perhaps I needed more help than he thought. More help. As if I were a burden. As if I were an incapable old woman who needed to be controlled. I stood up from my chair, looked at both of them, and told them with a voice firmer than I expected that dinner was not ready, that there was no dinner, that if they were hungry, they could go eat somewhere else. The silence that followed was thick and heavy. Michael looked at me as if he could not believe what he had heard. His wife let out a dry, bitter laugh, murmuring something about respect and gratitude. And then Michael said the phrase I still hear when I close my eyes at night. He said it with a coldness I had never heard from him before. He told me to be careful, because a woman of my age alone without a family that really cared about her could end up in a very bad place. That he was the only thing I had. That I should remember that before doing something foolish. They left after that. They left my house, slamming the doors, leaving a trail of rage and veiled threats. I heard them get into their car. I heard the engine start. I heard them drive away. And I stayed there, in my empty kitchen, in my empty house, feeling that something inside me broke forever. But what I felt was not sadness. It was not despair. It was something different. It was clarity, the absolute certainty that my son did not love me, that perhaps he never had, that I was just a resource for him, a source of money, of food, and comfort. I sat back down in my chair, looked at the bare walls of my living room, looked at the empty spaces where there used to be furniture that I had bought with my work, with my effort, and for the first time in a long time, I smiled because Michael did not know something. He did not know that I had not sold the furniture for money. I had sold it to send a message to see how he reacted, to confirm what I already suspected in the depths of my heart. And he had reacted exactly as I expected, with rage, with indignation, with the attitude of someone who feels they have a right to another person's things. That night, while sitting in the darkness of my empty house, I made a decision. I was not going to scream. I was not going to cry. I was not going to beg. I was going to do something much more powerful. I was going to observe. I was going to wait. I was going to let Michael believe he had won. And then when he least expected it, when he was most confident, most sure of his control over me, I was going to show him who Emily Miller really was. Not the submissive mother he thought he knew, but the woman who had survived a broken marriage, poverty, and years of hard work. The woman who knew exactly how to protect herself. The woman he never should have underestimated. There was a time when I believed that being a mother was enough, that the love one gives returns naturally, as if it were a universal law, that the sacrifices I made every day would build something solid, something unbreakable between my son and me. How wrong I was. Michael was born on a stormy night 34 years ago. His father, the man who had promised me a life together, left when the boy was barely 2 years old. He said he was not ready to be a dad, that he needed to find himself, that someday I would understand. I never understood. But I did not stay waiting for him to return either. I was left alone with a small child, a 2-room apartment I could barely afford, and a secretary job that paid me very little. It was not enough. It was never enough. So I got a second job cleaning offices at night. I left Michael with my neighbor, an older lady, who charged me a weekly fee to watch him. I worked from 7 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock in the evening at the office. I would return home, feed Michael, bathe him, put him to sleep, and then I would go out again at 9 at night to clean buildings until 2 o'clock in the morning. I slept 4 hours and then started it all over again. I did that for years. So many years I lost count. I remember Michael always wanted the brand name sneakers the other kids wore at school. They cost $100. I barely made ends meet between the 2 jobs. $100 was almost everything I had for food for 2 weeks, but I bought them for him because I did not want my son to feel less than anyone, because I wanted him to know his mother would do anything for him. I ate rice and beans for a whole month to be able to pay for those sneakers. When Michael turned 18, he wanted to go to a private university. It cost $40,000 a year. I did not have that money. I did not even have a tenth of it. But I went to the bank and took out a loan. I went into debt for the 4 years of his studies, and I ended up paying it for 10 years more. 10 years paying a debt so my son could have a college degree. He graduated. He got a good job. He was making $6,000 a month, double what I earned after 30 years of work, and I was happy. I thought he could finally build his life, that I had finally done my job well as a mother. But Michael did not leave my house right away. He said he wanted to save money, that he needed a solid base before living alone. I told him, of course, that my house was his house, that he could stay as long as he needed. He stayed 5 more years. 5 years in which I continued working my 2 jobs. 5 years in which I paid the rent. I paid for the food. I paid the utilities. 5 years in which Michael saved every penny of his salary because he did not have to pay anything. When he finally left, it was not to rent an apartment. It was to buy a house. A house worth $300,000, which he put a massive down payment on because he had saved all his money during those 5 years living for free in my house. I was proud. I told him I was proud, and I was. I thought I had done the right thing by helping him. I thought that now that he had his own house, maybe he could help me. Maybe I could work less. Maybe I could rest a little. But that never happened. Michael got married 2 years after moving out. His wife was an elegant woman, one of those who always dress well, who always have perfect nails, who speak with that tone that sounds polite but hides contempt. From the beginning, I noticed she looked at me differently, as if I were something inferior, as if she did not understand where Michael came from. At the wedding, which cost $50,000, they sat me at a table in the back, not at the main family table. Michael explained it was because there were many important people, clients from his work, and they needed those tables for them. I said I understood. I smiled in the photos. I danced when asked, and I returned alone to my house that night feeling strangely empty. After the wedding, Michael's visits became less frequent before he came to see me 2 or 3 times a week. After getting married, he came once every 2 weeks, then once a month, always in a hurry, always looking at his cell phone, always with some excuse to leave early. I said nothing. I did not want to be the annoying mother, the mother who complains, the mother who does not understand that her son already has his own life. But then they started coming on Friday nights, always at dinner time, always without warning, always expecting me to have food ready. At first, I was happy. I thought Michael finally wanted to spend time with me, that he finally missed me. So I cooked his favorite dishes. I set the table nicely. I bought dessert. But I noticed something. I noticed Michael never came alone. He always brought his wife. And I noticed they never came to talk. They came to eat. They arrived. They sat down. They ate. And they left. Sometimes they stayed an hour. sometimes less. I also noticed they never brought anything. Not a bottle of wine, not a dessert, not money to help with the groceries, nothing. One night after they left, I calculated how much I had spent on dinner. $80. $80. I did not have to spare $80. That meant I would have to work overtime to recover them. And I realized something. I realized that for Michael, I had become a service, a free restaurant, a place he could come to eat without paying, without even truly thanking me. I started noticing other things too. I noticed that when I asked him for help with something, he always had excuses. That when I needed him to take me to the doctor because my car was broken down, he was always busy. That when I mentioned my refrigerator was making strange noises, and I feared it would break down soon, he told me to buy a new one, as if I had $2,000 saved for emergencies. I did not have them. I barely had enough to make it to the end of the month. But what hurt me the most was my birthday, my 60th birthday. Michael arrived 2 hours late without a gift, without a card, with an excuse about traffic. He stayed 20 minutes. He ate the cake I had bought myself because I did not want to spend it alone. And he left. That night, I cried. I cried like I had not cried in years because I finally understood something I had been denying for a long time. I understood that for my son, I was no longer important, that I was just a resource, something that was there available waiting to be used when he needed it. And the worst part was that I had allowed it. I had established that pattern. I never asked him for anything. I never told him I felt used. I never told him I needed more from him than 20-minute visits and Friday dinners because I was afraid. Afraid that if I complained, if I asked, if I demanded, he would disappear completely. And the idea of losing my son, even that son who barely saw me, terrified me more than anything else. So I kept being the convenient mother, the silent mother, the mother who was always there, who always had the door open, who never caused problems until that Thursday afternoon, until Michael told me he wanted to handle my money. And something inside me, something that had been asleep for years, woke up. A small but clear voice told me that this was not right, that it was the beginning of something worse. But even so, even with that voice whispering to me, I told him yes, because I still had hope. I still wanted to believe my son loved me, that he would protect me, that he would do the right thing. How naive I was. The following Monday, Michael arrived at my house with papers, many papers. He spread them out on the kitchen table with that smile that now seemed different to me, less warm, more calculating. "Mom, this is simple," he told me. "I just need you to sign here, here, and here. They are the documents so I can have access to your account, so I can automatically transfer your paycheck every month. That way, I take care of paying your bills, of handling everything. You will not have to worry about anything." I looked at the papers. They were bank forms, authorizations. I read the fine print. That part almost no one reads. And I saw something that froze my blood. It was not just access to my account. It was total power. It was the authority to make transfers, to close accounts, to make financial decisions in my name. "Michael, it says here you would have total control over my money," I told him. He nodded as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "Yes, Mom. That way is easier that way.
I can handle everything without having to ask for authorization every time. It is for practicality." Practicality. That word resonated in my head. Practicality for whom I thought. But I did not say it. I took the pen he offered me, held it between my fingers, and for a moment I was about to sign, to hand him everything, because that was what I had always done: trust, surrender. But then I remembered Friday night. I remembered his face full of fury upon seeing the empty house. I remembered his words. I remembered how he had threatened me, although he probably did not even realize it was a threat. I left the pen on the table. You know what? Michael gave me a few days to think about it. I want to read everything calmly. I want to be sure. His expression changed for a second. Just a flash of irritation on his face before he smiled again. "Mom, there is nothing to think about. It is simple, but it is fine. If you want to take a few days, that is fine." He left, but he left the papers as if assuming I would end up signing them anyway. That night, I could not sleep. I stayed looking at those papers on the kitchen table, and something inside me told me this was not for my good, that it was the start of something I could not undo once it began. The next day, I went to the bank. I went early before work. I asked the teller to check my account to show me all the transactions from the last 6 months. She printed the papers. There were several sheets. I reviewed them carefully, line by line, and then I saw it. I saw it, and I felt the floor move under my feet. There was a withdrawal I had not made. A withdrawal of $1,500 from 3 months ago. $1,500 that had left my account and that I did not remember withdrawing. I asked the teller if I could see more details. She checked on her computer and told me something that left me breathless. She told me the withdrawal had been made at a branch on the other side of town with my debit card. But I had never gone to that branch, and my card was in my purse. It had always been in my purse, except once. Then I remembered. I remembered that 3 months ago, Michael had come to visit me. I was in the shower when he arrived. I shouted for him to come in, that the door was unlocked. When I came out, he was in the living room waiting for me. We sat down to talk, and at some point, I went to the kitchen to make coffee. My wallet was inside my handbag. My handbag was in the living room with Michael.
I felt nausea. I felt the whole world tilting in a strange way, because that could only mean one thing.
It meant my son had taken my card. He had memorized or photographed the numbers and had withdrawn money from my account without my permission. I asked the teller if there was any way to know exactly what had happened with that withdrawal.
She told me I needed to file a formal claim that the bank would investigate, that it could take several weeks. I told her I would think about it and walked out of the bank feeling like I no longer knew my own son. But I did not file the claim. Not yet, because I needed to be sure. I needed to know if that had been just once or if there was more. I spent the next few days reviewing everything, every paper I had in my house, every document, every old statement I had kept in a box in my closet. And I found more things. I found that 2 years ago, when I was in the hospital for pneumonia, someone had used my health insurance for consultations. I had not made consultations at clinics. I did not know consultations that exhausted my annual coverage, which is why I had to pay out of pocket for some medications that year. I also found there was a credit card in my name that I did not remember applying for, a card with a balance of $5,000. $5,000 in purchases I had not made in stores I had never been to. I called the card issuer. I asked them when the account had been opened. They told me 18 months ago. I asked if they could tell me where the purchases had been made. They gave me a list. Hardware stores, electronic stores, home improvement stores. Michael had bought a house 2 years ago. Michael had renovated that house, and apparently, Michael had used my credit to do it. I sat on the floor of my bedroom, surrounded by papers, feeling everything I had believed about my life crumbling. It was not just the money. It was the betrayal. It was knowing my son had been stealing from me for years, that he had seen me as an unlimited source of resources that he had never intended to care for or protect me. I cried. I cried until I had no tears left. And then I wiped my face. I gathered all the papers and made a decision. I was not going to confront him yet. I was not going to scream at him or demand answers, because I knew if I did, he would deny everything. He would say I was confused. He would say I was senile. He would say whatever it took to make me doubt my memory, my judgment, my sanity. No, I was going to be smarter than that. I was going to gather evidence. I was going to document everything. I was going to build a case so solid he could not deny it, and only then would I act. That Friday, Michael returned as always at dinner time, as always expecting me to have food ready. But this time, I had cooked something different. I had prepared his favorite dish, chicken, with rice and gravy. The same one I prepared for him when he was a child and came home sad from school. The dish that told him how much I loved him without needing words. He sat at the table with his wife. They ate. They talked about superficial things, work, the weather, the new movie they wanted to see. I watched them
as if seeing them for the first time. And I realized something. I realized Michael ate my food with the same indifference with which he would eat a fast food burger. There was no gratitude in his eyes. There was no love. Only the mechanical act of eating something free. When they finished, Michael took out the bank papers again. He put them on the table next to his empty plate. "Mom, the days you asked for have passed. You have thought about it right. Sign here, and I will take care of everything." I looked him directly in the eyes and told him with the calmest voice I could find that I was still not sure, that I needed more time. His wife is coughed. "Emily, this is ridiculous. Michael is just trying to help you. I do not understand why you are being so suspicious."
Suspicious. She called me suspicious. And the saddest thing was, she was right, but not in the sense she believed. Michael stood up. His expression was hard now, without the mask of a smile.
Mom, this is for your own good. You can no longer handle your finances alone. It is obvious. Look how you sold the furniture without thinking. Look at the irrational decisions you are taking. Irrational. Selling my own furniture in my own house was irrational. But stealing from me for years, that was not. I said nothing. I just held his gaze until he was the one who looked away. That night they left without saying goodbye. And I stayed sitting in my kitchen, looking at those unsigned papers, knowing the war had just begun. A silent war, a war I had to win. Because if I lost, I would not just lose my money. I would lose my dignity, my autonomy, my life. The days after that dinner became strange. Michael did not call me again. He did not visit me again. It was as if he had decided to punish me with his absence, as if he believed I would crumble without him, that I would beg him to come back, that I would finally sign those papers just to get his attention. But I did not crumble. For the first time in years, the silence of my house did not feel empty. It felt full of something different. It felt full of clarity. I spent those days reviewing every detail of my financial life, every receipt I had kept, every statement, every paper that had any connection to money. And the more I reviewed, the more I found. I discovered that 3 years ago, when Michael asked to borrow my ID because he had lost his and needed to pick up an urgent package, he had done something else with it. He had opened an electricity service contract in my name at an address that was not mine, his house. For 3 years, the electric bill for Michael's house had been in my name. And when he did not pay on time, the penalties accumulated on my credit history. That is why I had been denied a small loan last year when my car needed urgent repairs. That is why my credit score had dropped mysteriously. I called the power company, explained that account was not mine, that I had never lived at that address. The woman on the phone told me I needed to file a sworn statement, that I should report it as identity theft.
identity theft committed by my own son. I hung up the phone and stared at the wall. I do not know for how long, trying to process how I had reached this point, trying to understand at what moment my son had become this. That night, I could not sleep. I lay awake, looking at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the city outside. I thought about all the times I had justified his behavior, all the times I told myself he was busy, that he had his own life, that I was demanding for expecting more from him. But this was not about expectations. It was about theft, about deceit, about a son who saw his mother as a source of resources he could exploit without consequences. The next morning, I did something I had never done. I went to see a lawyer. It was a small office downtown.
The sign said, Attorney William Davis. I had seen an ad in the newspaper offering free consultations. I walked in feeling small, ridiculous, a 62-year-old woman coming to complain about her own son. But the receptionist smiled at me kindly and showed me in. Mr. Davis was a man of about 50, with graying temples and kind eyes. He asked me to tell him everything, and I did. I told him about the money that had disappeared, about the credit card I had not requested, about the electric bill, about the papers Michael wanted me to sign. He listened without interrupting. He took notes in a notebook, and when I finished, he leaned back in his chair and sighed. Mrs. Miller, he told me, what you are describing to me is financial fraud and breach of trust. If you sign those papers your son is asking for, you are giving him total legal access to your money. He could empty your account, and you would have no legal recourse because you yourself granted him permission. His words fell on me like stones. I knew it deep down. I knew it, but hearing it from a professional made it real in a different way. What can I do? I asked him. He leaned forward. First, do not sign anything. Second, you need to report the credit card fraud and the withdrawal from your bank account. Third, change all your passwords, your personal identification numbers, everything. Fourth, consider requesting a restraining order if you feel you are in danger. A restraining order against my own son. The idea seemed absurd and devastating at the same time. I do not want to get him in legal trouble, I told him. He is my son. The lawyer looked at me with something that looked like compassion and sadness. Mrs. Miller, your son is already in legal trouble. He has committed several crimes. The question is not if you want to get him in trouble, but if you want to protect yourself. I left that office with a folder full of forms and a list of things to do. I felt overwhelmed, but I also felt something else. I felt determination. I went straight to the bank. I changed all my passwords. I asked for a new debit card. I closed the fraudulent credit card and filed a formal dispute. The bank teller helped me with everything. She treated me with patience without making me feel foolish or weak. When I got home that afternoon,
I felt exhausted, but also strangely light, as if I had removed an invisible weight I had carried for years. That night, Michael finally called. His voice sounded tense on the phone. "Mom, we need to talk. Come to dinner at my house tomorrow. We have to fix this." It was not an invitation. It was an order. And before I would have obeyed without questioning, but now, after everything I had discovered, I only felt a cold calm. "I cannot tomorrow," I told him. "I am busy. "Mom, what can you have that is so important? This is important to you." Maybe I told him for me, there are other, more important things now. There was a silence on the other end of the line. A silence loaded with surprise and irritation. "You are acting very weird, Mom. I do not know what is wrong with you, but you have to stop being so stubborn and sign those papers. This is for your own good, for my own good." Those words again, as if stealing from me, were an act of love. "Michael," I said, with a voice that came out firmer than I expected. "I'm not going to sign anything. And I think we need to have a very serious conversation about several things." "About what things?" he asked. His voice sounded different now, more alert, more cautious. "About money that has left my account without my permission, about credit cards I did not request, about electric services registered in my name or at addresses where I do not live." The silence that followed was absolute, so dense. I could almost feel it through the phone. "I do not know what you are talking about," he said finally. His voice sounded controlled, but underneath I could hear the panic. "I think you do know," I responded.
And I think you should think very carefully about what you are going to say next.
"Mom, you are delirious. You are confused. Maybe you need to see a doctor." There it was, the card I knew he would play. The card to make me look senile, confused, incapable. "I am not confused, Michael. I have all the papers. I have all the proof. And I already spoke with a lawyer." Another silence. This one longer, heavier. "You spoke with a lawyer," he whispered almost like a threat. "Yes, and he explained to me exactly what you have been doing. He explained what fraud is, that it is illegal." "Mom, you cannot be serious. I am your son. Everything I have done has been to help you." "Help me, Michael. You robbed me for years. You used me. You lied to me." "I would never do that," he started to say. But I interrupted him. "Yes, you did, and you know it. The question now is, what are we going to do about it?" I heard his breathing on the other end of the line, heavy, agitated. "I am coming over," he said.
We have to talk in person. I did not answer him. You are not coming. If you want to talk, we do it over the phone or with lawyers present. Are you crazy? He shouted, completely crazy. After everything I have done for you, all the times I have gone to see you, that I have worried about you, all the times you came to eat for free, you mean. But the times I needed you, where were you?
I hung up before he could respond, before he could manipulate me again with words. And I stayed there, sitting in my kitchen, with the phone in my hand, trembling, but not from fear, but from rage, from years and years of repressed rage that finally found its voice. That night, I slept better than in months because I finally told the truth. I finally stood firm. And although I did not know what would come next, I knew I would never again be the silent mother who let herself be trampled. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I had not felt in years. It was as if a thick fog had lifted from my mind, and now I could see everything with an almost painful sharpness. I knew what I had to do. I knew I could not stop now. After breakfast, I took my purse and left the house. I had a mental list of all the places I needed to visit, of all the loose ends I had to tie up. If Michael believed I was a confused and helpless old woman, he was about to discover just how wrong he was. My first stop was the main bank where I had my savings account. Not the payroll account where I received my check, but the other one. The one I had opened 30 years ago when I still dreamed of buying my own house someday. I had $25,000 saved. It was not much after a lifetime of work, but it was mine. I asked the manager to close that account. She asked if I was sure if there was a problem. I told her I just wanted to make some changes. She handed me the money in a cashier's check and recommended I open an account at another bank for greater security.
I followed her advice. I went to a different bank, one on the other side of town, where Michael had never gone with me. I opened a new account, an account only I knew about, an account where he could never find my money. Then I went to the electric company. I handed over all the documents Mr. Davis had helped me prepare. The sworn affidavit, the copy of my ID, the proof that I had never lived at the address where that account was registered. The woman who helped me reviewed everything and told me they would start an investigation, that the account would be transferred to the correct name or closed, that I would no longer be responsible. I felt like an invisible chain had fallen from my shoulders. My next stop was the credit bureau. I requested a complete report of my history. I wanted to see it all. I wanted to know if there were more things Michael had done behind my back. The clerk handed me a thick document. I sat in the waiting room and read it page by page. There was something else I did not know. A personal loan of $10,000 requested 2 years ago in my name. A loan that had never been fully paid and was now in collections. $10,000. I felt the rage rise up my throat like bile. I marked every fraudulent movement with a marker. I filled out the dispute forms one by one with handwriting that was firm and clear. When I left that office, it was almost 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I had not eaten anything since breakfast, but I was not hungry. I had something stronger than hunger. I had purpose.
Then I went to my neighbor's house, Mrs. Alice Johnson. She was 70 years old and had lived in the building since before me. We had been friends for decades, although in recent years we had grown a little distant. I had been so focused on Michael, so consumed by trying to maintain that relationship, that I had neglected other connections. I knocked on her door. She opened it with surprise on her face. Emily, what a surprise. Come in, come in.
We went into her living room. She offered me coffee, and I accepted. We sat down, and she looked at me with those wise eyes that had already seen much in life. "You look different," she told me. "I do not know what it is, but there is something different about you," she said. And then I told her everything. I told her about Michael, about the money, about the betrayal, about everything I had discovered. I spoke for almost an hour without stopping, and she listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally with an expression that mixed sadness and something that looked like recognition. When I finished, she sighed deeply. "Emily, I knew something was not right. I saw it every Friday when he came, the way he treated you, as if you were a service. But I said nothing, because it was not my place. But I am glad you are finally seeing the truth." She took my hand. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was firm. "I need to ask you a favor," I told her. "I need you to be my witness." I need you so that if Michael comes and tries to say, "I am confused, that I am senile," you can confirm that is not true, that I am in full control of my faculties. She nodded without hesitation. "Of course, and more than that, if you need a place to stay, if at any moment you do not feel safe in your house, my door is open." Those words filled me with a gratitude so deep, they almost made me cry. But I did not cry. I had already cried enough. Now it was time to act. That night, back in my house, I organized all the documents I had gathered. I put them in a large folder. I made copies of everything. I kept the originals in a safe place and left the copies in the folder. If something happened to me, if Michael tried to do something, there would be evidence. There would be proof. I also wrote a letter detailing everything I had discovered, everything Michael had done. I put it in a sealed envelope with instructions that it should only be opened in case of emergency. I gave it to Mrs. Alice to keep safe. I was preparing myself like a general preparing for battle, because I knew Michael was not going to leave this be. I knew he would come, that he would try to manipulate me, convince me, make me doubt myself. But I was no longer the same woman I had been 2 weeks ago. That woman had died the night Michael threatened me in my own kitchen. The woman I was now was different, stronger, clearer, more determined. Wednesday afternoon, while making tea, I heard a car stop in front of my building.
I looked out the window and saw Michael's car. He got out along with his wife. They came with determination. They came to confront me. I took a deep breath. I left my cup of tea on the table and waited. The doorbell rang once, twice, 3 times, each time more insistent. I opened the door, but I did not invite them in. I stayed in the doorway, blocking the entrance. "We need to talk," said Michael. His voice was hard, without any pretense of kindness.
"I am listening,"
I answered. "Inside, Mom. We are not going to talk in the hallway. We have nothing to talk about inside. Whatever you have to say, you can say here." His wife snorted. "This is ridiculous, Emily. Stop acting as if we were enemies. You are not enemies." I told them enemies are honest with their hostility. You are worse. You are thieves hiding behind pretty words. Michael took a step toward me. His face was red with fury. "How dare you? After everything I have done for you, everything you have done for me." "Michael, I have the records. I have the proof. I know exactly how much money you have stolen from me. I know about the fraudulent cards. I know about the electric bill. I know about everything." He froze. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. And now I continued with a calm that surprised me. "You have 2 options. Either you return everything you stole from me, every penny, or I go to the police and file fraud charges." "You cannot do that," said his wife. "He is your son."
"That is why it hurts so much," I answered. "Because he is my son. Because I gave him everything, and he repaid me by robbing me." Michael finally found his voice. "You owe me," he shouted. "My whole life I grew up without a father. My whole life I had to watch you work and be tired. That was your fault. You decided to have me. You decided to stay alone. I did not ask to be born." His words fell like blows, but they no longer hurt me like before, because now I could see them for what they were: justifications, excuses from someone who knew he had done something unforgivable and was trying to deflect the guilt. "You are right," I told him. "I decided to have you, and it was the best decision of my life until it stopped being so. But that does not give you the right to steal from me. That does not give you the right to exploit me. I stole nothing from you. I only took what was owed to me. Nothing was owed to you, Michael. I gave you everything you needed when you were a child." When you were an adult, it was no longer my obligation, and it was definitely not my obligation to give you access to my money without my knowledge. His wife grabbed his arm. "Let's go. It is not worth it. She is already lost." Lost. What an interesting choice of words. as if I were the one in the wrong, as if defending my money and my dignity were madness. They left then. They went down the stairs without looking back, and I closed the door feeling strangely calm. That night, Mr. Davis called me. He told me the banks had confirmed the fraud, that the card charges would be canceled, that they were investigating the unauthorized withdrawals, that I had a solid case if I decided to press criminal charges. I thanked him and hung up. I sat in my empty living room in my house that no longer had a television or elegant furniture. And for the first time in a long time, I felt rich. Rich in something money could not buy. Rich in dignity, in strength, in the certainty that I was doing the right thing. The days that followed that confrontation at my door were strangely silent, as if the whole world was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. And I found myself trapped in a kind of emotional limbo, where rage and pain mixed with a growing sense of liberation that I did not know how to process entirely. Michael did not call again. He did not show up at my door again. And for the first time in years, I was no longer waiting for his contact every minute. I no longer checked my phone every hour to see if there was a message from him. I no longer invented excuses in my mind to justify his absence or his silence. But although he was not physically present in my life, his digital presence was impossible to ignore. Something inside me led me to check his social media, something I normally did not do because it had always seemed like an invasion of his privacy, even being his mother. But now, I felt I had the right to know what he was doing, what he was saying, how he was presenting his life to the world, while I dealt in silence with the consequences of his actions. What I found left me breathless with his brazenness, with the absolute disconnection between reality and the image he projected outward. He had posted a photo the day after our confrontation, a photo of him and his wife at a fancy restaurant, smiling at the camera with glasses of wine in hand. And the text said something about freeing oneself from toxic energies and surrounding oneself only with people who add value to life, as if I were the toxicity he needed to free himself from. As if the fact that I had refused to let him keep stealing from me was some kind of negativity that he, with such wisdom, had decided to remove from his existence. The comments underneath were all positive, all congratulating him for protecting his mental peace, for setting healthy boundaries, for prioritizing his emotional well-being. And I stood there looking at that screen, feeling a mixture of disbelief and disgust, because all those people supporting him had no idea that the man they were celebrating had been stealing from his own mother for years. There were more posts in the following days, each more elaborate than the last, as if Michael were deliberately building a public narrative of his life that had nothing to do with the truth. I saw a photo of him at the gym accompanied by a reflection on self-care and the importance of investing in oneself,
before being able to help others. Words that sounded deep until you remembered he was the same man who had used money stolen from me to pay for gym memberships and expensive sportswear.
Another photo showed him working on his computer with a comment about the sacrifice and effort necessary to build a successful future, without mentioning that a part of that future had been funded with fraudulent credit cards in my name and services I paid for without knowing. What impacted me the most was a post he made that Friday, exactly the day he would normally have come to dinner at my house. A post where he shared an old photo from when he was a child with me, a photo. I did not even know he had a photo where I was holding him in my arms when he was about 5 years old, and we were both smiling. And the text accompanying the photo spoke of how sometimes the people you love most are the ones who hurt you. Most of how he had learned that love does not mean tolerating abusive behaviors, of how he had made the difficult decision to distance himself from a toxic family relationship for the sake of his mental health. Reading those words was like receiving a punch in the stomach, because Michael had taken our story, our real relationship with all its complexities and pains, and had inverted it completely, presenting himself as the victim and presenting me as the aggressor. The comments on that post were even more abundant than on the previous ones. Dozens of people expressing their support, telling him how brave he was for setting boundaries, sharing their own experiences with difficult relatives, validating completely his fabricated version. There were people I knew in those comments, neighbors who watched him grow up, co-workers who had come to parties at my house years ago, all offering him words of encouragement and solidarity without having the slightest idea that the person he supposedly had to protect himself from was the same woman who had worked 2 jobs for years to give him the education he now used to get his well-paid job. For several days, I watched that digital spectacle in silence without commenting, without reacting publicly, because something in me knew that was exactly the game Michael was playing. That if I responded emotionally, I would fall into his trap. I would give him more ammunition for his narrative, the narrative where I was the unstable and problematic mother he needed to get away from. But each new post, each new comment of support he received from people who did not know the truth was like a small wound opening inside me. Not because I cared what those people specifically thought of me, but because it hurt to see how easy it was for people to believe a well-told story without questioning if there could be another version of the facts. The straw that broke the camel's back came when Michael posted a story on his account where he showed the house he and his wife had bought, showing off the renovations they had made, the new furniture they had acquired, the perfectly designed garden, all presented as the fruit of his effort and dedication, without a single mention of the fact that a significant part of all that had been paid for with money that was not his, with credit, obtained fraudulently. Using my personal information, showing it all with such pride, with such satisfaction, as if he really believed he had earned it alone, as if he had completely forgotten or simply did not care that every brick of that house was built, at least in part, on the sacrifice
and theft of his own mother. I watched him live his life in those small digital windows and wondered how it was possible that someone could sleep at night knowing what he had done.
How it was possible to maintain that facade of a successful and ethically correct man, while at the same time he had committed fraud and theft against the person who gave him life. I wondered if he ever felt guilt, if ever in the middle of one of those fancy dinners at expensive restaurants or during one of those gym workouts. He stopped a moment and thought about his mother sitting alone in an empty house after having sold her furniture to be able to eat because her own son had been systematically stealing from her for years. But looking at his posts, seeing the ease with which he built and maintained that perfect public image, I understood something fundamental about Michael. Something perhaps I always knew on some level, but never wanted to fully admit that my son had developed the capacity to create parallel realities in his mind. Realities in which he could be at the same time the abandoned son who deserved compensation, the successful man who had built everything by himself, where he could justify theft as something owed to him while publicly presenting himself as a victim of toxic family relationships. It was a form of cognitive dissonance so deep, it almost seemed he really believed his own lies, as if he had constructed a narrative so elaborate in his head that the line between truth and fiction had been completely erased. And as I watched all that from the silent distance of my empty house, something inside me hardened more than it already was, because seeing him not only steal from me, but also steal my history completely, invert the roles of victim and perpetrator in his public tale, made me understand that here there was no redemption possible. There was no conversation I could have with him that would make him see the reality of what he had done. He had chosen his path. He had chosen the lie over the truth. He had chosen appearance over substance. And I needed to accept that the son I thought I had raised and loved either never existed as I thought, or had been completely replaced by this stranger who could smile for the camera while destroying his mother in private without feeling any genuine remorse. The moment arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in a way I did not plan, but that in retrospect was inevitable, because the truth always finds the light, no matter how many layers of lies are piled on top to bury it. I was in Mr. Davis's office reviewing the final documents of the case when he informed me that the banks had concluded their investigations and had confirmed a total of $30,000 in fraudulent transactions over 3 years, an amount that left me breathless, not so much for the number itself, but for what it represented in terms of planning and premeditation, because this had not been a mistake, nor a moment of weakness, but a systematic and deliberate operation of theft that had required constant effort
and dedication on Michael's part. The lawyer explained to me that with this evidence, I had more than enough to press criminal charges, but that there was also another option I might want to consider before taking that final decision. That option was to send a formal demand letter to Michael, giving him the opportunity to return the stolen money and compensate for damages before proceeding with more severe legal actions. He told me this was a courtesy.
Many victims of family fraud offered because they understood that however serious the crime, family ties complicated the situation in a way that did not happen when fraud was committed by strangers.
But he also warned me that this courtesy could be interpreted as weakness by the aggressor, and that I should be prepared for the possibility that Michael would respond not with gratitude or remorse, but with more manipulation and denial. I thought about that for several minutes sitting in the lawyer's office, looking at all the documents scattered on the desk, detailing meticulously every fraudulent transaction, every unauthorized account, every lie my son had carefully constructed for years. And I realized that a part of me still held a small, irrational hope that if Michael was confronted with the irrefutable evidence of what he had done, maybe something inside him would wake up. Maybe he would find some vestige of conscience or remorse, or at least the basic recognition that he had crossed a line that should not be crossed. That part of me that remained his mother, despite everything, wanted to give him that chance to do the right thing, to correct his mistake, to demonstrate that in some deep corner of his interior, there still existed something of the boy I had raised with so much love and sacrifice. But there was another part of me, stronger, clearer, more realistic, that knew exactly what Michael would do with that opportunity. And that part knew he would not see it as an act of grace, but as confirmation that I was too weak to hurt him, that he could continue manipulating and controlling me. Because at the end of the day, I would always yield because I am his mother, and mothers always forgive, always give another chance, always choose love over justice. That part of me understood that giving him a private warning would only give him time to prepare his defense, hide more evidence, build an even more elaborate narrative of victimization he could use publicly to destroy my credibility before I could act. I told Mr. Davis I did not want to send a private letter, that I did not want to give Michael the chance to respond in secret where he could continue controlling the narrative and manipulating the situation in his favor. And instead, I asked him to prepare the necessary documents to file a formal civil lawsuit, which would become a public record where anyone who wanted to verify the truth could do so, instead of simply believing the version of events Michael had built so carefully on his social media. The lawyer nodded with what seemed like a mix of surprise and respect, because probably he did not expect a woman of my age to take such a direct
and unambiguous decision and told me he would proceed immediately with the preparation of all necessary documents and that Michael would be officially notified within the next 72 hours. I walked out of that office feeling something I had not felt in a long time, and that at first I could not identify until I understood it was power. The power of having made a decision completely by myself, without consulting anyone, without asking permission, without worrying about how others would see me, or if people would think I was being too hard on my own son. For the first time in decades, I had chosen to protect myself
before protecting the feelings or reputation of another person, even when that person was a son. And that choice, although painful, filled me with a sense of integrity I had forgotten was possible to feel.
The notification reached Michael on a Thursday morning as Mr. Davis confirmed by phone, and although I was not there to see his initial reaction, I could imagine perfectly the moment he opened that official envelope and read the documents detailing every fraudulent transaction, every unauthorized account, every dollar he had stolen from me, meticulously documented with dates and bank references that made any denial impossible. I did not have to wait long to confirm my imagination, because less than 2 hours after he received the notification, my phone began to ring with an insistence bordering on desperation call after call that I let go to voicemail without answering, because I no longer had anything to say to Michael that was not contained in those legal documents. I listened to the messages that same night when I finally felt emotionally prepared to do so, and it was fascinating in a disturbing way to hear the progression of his panic through each successive message. The first one still tried to maintain some composure with that controlled voice he used when he wanted to seem reasonable, telling me this was a terrible misunderstanding and that we needed to talk immediately before things got more out of control. The second message already had another tone, sharper, more urgent. He begged me to call him, that this was going to ruin his life. That, please. I should think about what I was doing before destroying my own son, as if I were the one destroying something, instead of simply revealing the destruction he himself had caused for years. By the fifth message, Michael was no longer trying to sound reasonable or appeal to my maternal compassion, but had passed completely to rage and veiled threats, telling me I was going to regret this, that he had his own lawyers, that they were going to prove I was a demented old woman who did not know what she was doing, that he was going to fight this with everything he had, and that in the end, I would be the villain of this story. I listened to every message until the end, without allowing myself to feel anything except a sort of clinical curiosity about how a person could pass so quickly. From begging to threatening, when they realized their manipulation tactics no longer worked. The following days were a whirlwind of legal and emotional activity, because Michael did not stay still, but began his own counterattack campaign, starting by posting a long and elaborate statement on his social media about how he was being the victim of a terrible injustice perpetrated by a mother he supposedly loved, but who was now attacking him legally for reasons he could not fully understand. His post was carefully drafted to generate the most sympathy possible, without mentioning any specific detail of the accusations against him, presenting himself as the confused and hurt son who was being dragged into a traumatic legal process by a mother who perhaps was experiencing mental health problems related to age. The response to his post was exactly what he expected. Dozens of comments expressing surprise and solidarity, telling him to keep his head up, that the truth would eventually come to light, that they were on his side no matter what. And I watched all this from a distance with a mix of astonishment and repulsion at his capacity to manipulate the narrative, even in the face of documented legal accusations. But something had changed in me, because this time, his public theater did not affect me in the same way as before. This time, I knew I had something more powerful than his carefully constructed words, and that something was irrefutable legal documents that could not be manipulated with emotional rhetoric or appeals to pity. Michael's true collapse began when his own lawyers reviewed the evidence against him and apparently told him something he did not want to hear, because suddenly his social media posts stopped abruptly, and the silence that followed was deafening in its eloquence. Mr.
Davis informed me that Michael's legal representatives had communicated with him asking about the possibility of reaching an out-of-FC court settlement, which basically confirmed they knew he had no real defense against the evidence I had presented, and that his best option was to try to minimize the damage before this advanced to a public trial, where all the dirty details would be revealed in public access documents. It was then that the cracks began to appear in Michael's carefully constructed life, because apparently some of his closest friends started asking uncomfortable questions after his wife mentioned casually at a social gathering that they were dealing with a complicated family legal problem. And once people started investigating a little more, they discovered the public lawsuit documents detailing the specific accusations of financial fraud. Mrs. Alice told me she had heard other neighbors comment that Michael's name was being mentioned in neighborhood conversations in ways that were definitely not flattering, that people who before saw him as the successful and polite son now looked at him with suspicion and distrust. His wife apparently was furious, not necessarily for the moral implications of what Michael had done, but for the damage to her social reputation. And according to rumors that reached my ears through the neighborhood gossip network, there had been considerable fights in his house about how to handle the situation. Michael tried to call me several more times during those weeks, but I maintained my absolute silence because there was nothing he could tell me that would change the documented facts of what he had done. And that silence of mine apparently was more devastating to him than any angry word I could have said, because it meant I had passed completely from anger to indifference.
And that indifference was the final death of any power he ever had over me. The final agreement was reached 3 months after I filed the lawsuit, and the terms were exactly what Mr. Davis and I had established as the minimum acceptable, because Michael had no choice but to accept when his own lawyers explained that going to trial would mean not only the public revelation of all the details of his fraud, but also the very real possibility of criminal charges that could result in jail time. He had to return the full $30,000 plus another $10,000 as compensation for damages, as well as pay all credit cleanup costs and my attorney's fees. And all this had to be paid in a period of 6 months with verifiable monthly payments, or the agreement would be automatically invalidated and criminal charges would proceed without further warning. But beyond the money, which honestly was never the main point of all this, the agreement included a clause I had insisted on adding, and that Mr.
Davis initially thought was unnecessary, but that for me was absolutely essential. And that clause established that Michael had to issue a public statement acknowledging that he had committed financial fraud against his mother, and that the accusations in my lawsuit were true and founded. He fought that clause more than any other part of the agreement because he knew exactly what it would mean for his carefully cultivated image to admit publicly that everything he had been saying about being the victim of a toxic mother was a lie designed to cover up his own crimes. The statement appeared on his social media on a Tuesday afternoon. It was brief and clearly drafted by his lawyers to minimize the damage as much as possible within the limits of what the agreement demanded. But even so, there were the words in black text on a white background, admitting he had accessed bank accounts without authorization, that he had opened credit cards using another person's information, and that he had committed serious errors of judgment that he deeply regretted. The comments under that post were chaos. People who had previously supported him unconditionally now expressed surprise and disappointment, while others who apparently had always suspected something felt validated in their doubts. And I watched all that digital drama unfold with a sense of closure that had nothing to do with satisfaction or revenge, but simply with the quiet recognition that the truth had finally been told in public. The first payment arrived in my account on the exact specified date, and every subsequent payment arrived on time too, because Michael knew a single delay would mean consequences, or who definitely could not afford to pay them. And with that money, I did something perhaps he never expected me to do. Because instead of simply returning it to my savings accounts, or using it to replace the furniture I had sold, I bought a plane ticket to a place I had never been. I had spent 62 years living for other people. First for my son's father, then for my son, and then for the illusion of maintaining a family relationship that only existed in my imagination. And now, for the first time in my adult life, I had the freedom and resources to live exactly how I wanted, without having to justify my decisions to anyone. I bought a small house in a coastal town 3 hours from the place where I had lived my whole life. A house with 2 rooms and a patio, where I could finally plant the flowers I always wanted
but never had time to care for when I worked 2 jobs. The house cost me a significant amount, which I paid in cash using a combination of Michael's payments and the savings I had managed to protect in my new bank account.
And when I signed the purchase papers, I felt something I could only describe as a rebirth. Because that house was mine in a way no other place had ever been acquired with money that had returned to me through justice, not earned through endless sacrifice. Michael tried to contact me one last time after making the final payment, complying completely with the terms of the agreement. And that time, I answered the phone because I knew there was nothing left he could take from me or use against me. His voice sounded different, smaller, more humble, when he asked me if someday we could really talk, if there would be any possibility of some kind of reconciliation. And I listened to his question in silence before answering with the words I had been preparing in my mind for months. I told him the son I raised never really existed or died at some point along the way, replaced by someone I did not know and did not want to know.
And that although I wished him peace and growth in his life, that peace and growth would have to happen far from me because I had closed that door not out of hatred, but out of self-love. There was a long silence after my words, and then a sound that could have been a sob or simply a broken breath before he hung up without saying anything else. And that was the last time I spoke with Michael, because some doors once closed need to stay that way, not as punishment, but as protection. Now I live in my little house by the sea, and I spend my mornings drinking coffee in my garden, watching the flowers grow that I planted with my own hands. And there is a peace in this simple life that I never found in all those years of sacrifice and giving, because I finally understood that true love starts with oneself, and that no relationship is worth it if it requires you to betray your own dignity. Sometimes I see Mrs.
Alice, who comes to visit me every few weeks, bringing me gossip from the old neighborhood and news of people we used to know. And she tells me I look different now, lighter, more alive in ways that go beyond the physical. I have a routine that is completely mine. I wake up when my body wants to wake up, not when an alarm clock forces me. I cook food I like without thinking about anyone else's tastes. I spend my afternoons reading books I always wanted to read but never had time for. And at night, I sit on my small porch, listening to the distant sound of the waves and feeling deep gratitude, not for what I have materially, but for what I finally understood about my own worth. This is my victory, not in the money recovered, nor in Michael's public admission, but in the fact that I recovered myself from decades of conditioning that had taught me that a mother's worth was measured only by how much she could give and how much she could endure. I learned that saying no is an act of self-love, that setting boundaries is not cruelty, but necessity, that protecting your peace is not selfishness, but wisdom. And now, I live every day as a testimony to those lessons learned, late, but not too late, not to matter. I close that door to Michael, not for revenge, but for dignity. And that difference changes everything because it means I won. Not by becoming his enemy, but simply by refusing to continue being my own victim. When the afternoon falls and the noise of the world fades, sometimes the only thing we have left is the certainty that mothers also deserve respect, not just sacrifice. Emily's story is not just about money. It is about dignity, about that moment when you finally say enough, even if it hurts your soul. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story on Elderly Stories. If it touched your heart, please subscribe, and tell me in the comments, what would you have done in Emily's place? Would you have reported him? Would you have forgiven? Or would you simply have closed the door forever? Because maybe your words today will give strength to another grandmother who is living something similar in silence. And tell me also, where are you listening to my story from? I would love to read you.